I have an announcement to make, Andrew said, tapping his wine glass with a spoon. The chatter around my parents' crowded dinner table faded as every head turned toward my husband of 7 years. I studied his face carefully, the faint tremor in his hand, the way his eyes flicked toward my sister Jenna, before settling somewhere above everyone's heads. My heartbeat stayed steady, betraying none of the truth I'd been carrying for months. Vivian and I are getting divorced, he continued, his voice gaining strength. I hadn't planned to announce it like this, but since everyone's here... My mother gasped. Aunt Patricia placed a hand over her chest. My father's thick eyebrows drew together in confusion. There's more, Andrew added, reaching across the table to take Jenna's hand. Jenna and I have fallen in love. We've tried to fight it for years, but sometimes love chooses you. The stunned silence that followed was broken only by my mother's whispered, "Oh my God!" All eyes turned to me, bracing for the inevitable scene. Tears, shouting, maybe even a plate or two hurled across the room. Instead, I nodded calmly and said, "Please, everyone, check your emails. I'm Vivian Hayes, 32 years old, a digital forensics specialist at a cybersecurity firm in Seattle. My work involves reconstructing digital evidence, tracing electronic footprints, and documenting behavioral patterns online. I'm good at it, methodical, precise, and patient. What I'd wanted was simple. A marriage grounded in honesty and respect. Standing in the way of that were my husband, Andrew, and my younger sister, Jenna, who had apparently decided that their happiness outweighed mine. The betrayal wasn't just their affair, it was the deception that came with it. The lies told not just to me but to our entire family. The rewriting of our shared history to excuse what they'd done. The assumption that I would quietly play the part of the devastated victim in their carefully crafted narrative? Emails? Andrew asked, confusion flickering across his face. What emails? I sent them just before dinner, I said, pulling out my phone. Everyone should have them by now. Around the table, relatives hesitated before reaching for their phones. My cousin David was the first to open his. His eyes widened as he scrolled. My mother followed, her hand flying to her mouth as she gasped again. What have you done? Jenna hissed, her face draining of color as she grabbed her phone. Andrew looked uneasy, glancing between me and his still unopened email. It's just documentation, I said evenly. Something I'm particularly good at. As more people read, the shock in the room shifted, no longer directed at me, but at them. Disbelief turned to disgust, anger, and disappointment, all aimed squarely at Andrew and Jenna. What none of them realized yet was that the emails contained only a glimpse of what I'd uncovered. The full extent of their betrayal was far worse than anyone here, except perhaps the two of them, could imagine. Andrew and I had met 8 years ago at a charity fundraiser for Seattle Children's Hospital. He was a pediatric anesthesiologist, dedicated, kind, and deeply admired. I was there representing my company, which had donated cybersecurity services to the hospital. Our connection had been instant and electric. Within a year, we were married in my parents' backyard. Those first few years were beautiful. We bought a craftsman bungalow in Queen Anne and spent weekends fixing it up together, building a life that, at the time, I thought would last forever. Andrew's work schedule was demanding, but he always made time for us. Surprise weekend trips, elaborate Sunday breakfasts, little love notes tucked into my laptop bag. He had a way of making me feel cherished, seen and safe. Jenna, on the other hand, had always been the restless one. She'd dropped out of college twice, bounced between cities, and switched careers so often it made my head spin. When she moved back to Seattle 3 years ago after another failed attempt at finding herself in Denver, I was the one who suggested she stay with us until she got back on her feet. Andrew had been hesitant. Are you sure? He'd asked. It might change our dynamic. She's my sister, I said. Family helps family. What was supposed to be a 2-month stay stretched into 6. Jenna quickly landed a job at a local art gallery, but claimed she couldn't afford Seattle's rental prices. I didn't mind. I'd missed her. Her presence filled a space in our home I hadn't realized was empty. Looking back, the signs were all there. Subtle, but there. Andrew working later than usual. Jenna's errands taking hours longer than they should have. The private jokes I wasn't part of. The quiet tension that sometimes filled the room when I walked in, like I'd interrupted something. "You two seem to get along well," my mother said once during a family barbecue, watching as Andrew helped Jenna set up a badminton net. "Why wouldn't they?" I'd asked, genuinely confused. Mom just shrugged. "Some men don't get along with their in-laws. You're lucky, and I was lucky, or at least I thought I was." My husband and my sister had become close friends. Our house felt livelier with Jenna's energy. If Andrew seemed distant sometimes, I blamed stress. If I caught Jenna watching him with an odd kind of intensity, I dismissed it as imagination. Even after she moved into her own apartment, Jenna remained a constant presence in our lives. Sunday dinners, spontaneous movie nights, calls for help with things that conveniently couldn't wait until I got home from work. "You're too trusting," my friend Heather told me once, after Jenna called Andrew for the third time during our lunch. I wouldn't let my sister get that comfortable with my husband. I'd laughed it off. Jenna's just needy. Besides, it's Andrew. The implication was clear. Andrew would never betray me. He was too honest, too devoted, too good. If he occasionally glanced at his phone and locked it quickly, I told myself not to be paranoid. If he and Jenna went quiet the moment I entered a room, I assured myself it was coincidence. Trust, after all, was the foundation of our marriage. The discovery came by accident, as these things often do. 6 months ago, I was using Andrew's laptop to order takeout while he was at work. When I opened the browser, it automatically restored his previous session, his email still open. I wasn't looking for anything. I had no suspicions, no reason to pry. But there it was, a string of messages between Andrew and Jenna, explicit and unmistakable. "Last night was amazing," Jenna had written. "I can't stop thinking about you." "We need to be more careful," Andrew replied. "I don't want to hurt Viv." I read through the entire thread with eerie calm, the same detached focus I used when analyzing evidence at work. The emails went back over 2 years, 2 years of lies, 2 years of betrayal, unfolding right beneath my roof. I closed the laptop without ordering dinner. When Andrew came home that night, I searched his face for the stranger I'd glimpsed in the messages. I found hints, small tells, that the man who kissed my forehead and asked about my day might be the same one who had written those words to my sister. Yet outwardly he was unchanged. "You okay?" he asked, noticing my quietness. "Rough day at work?" "Just tired," I lied. Watching him with focused attention, how easily the falsehood slid from his lips, how naturally he moved through our home and our life while harboring this secret. Over the next few days, I swung between numbness and a raw, gnawing pain. I'd jolt awake at 3 a.m., heart pounding, replaying questions about how I'd missed it all. By day, I functioned on autopilot, going to the office, making dinner, participating in conversations that suddenly felt scripted and hollow. I didn't confront them right away. Part of me clung to the hope of an explanation that would make sense of the absurd. Maybe the emails were fantasies never acted upon. Maybe Andrew had been coerced somehow. Maybe I'd misread the context. But old habits die hard. My professional instincts took over and I began documenting, first almost unconsciously. I tracked instances when Andrew said he was working late, but his phone or location data placed him elsewhere. I logged accidental meetings between him and Jenna that happened far too often to be chance. I reconciled credit card statements against hotel reservations and restaurant charges. The evidence accumulated, clear, undeniable, and devastating. Not only were they involved, they were astonishingly careless about it, as if they assumed I wouldn't notice or simply didn't care if I did. 2 weeks after that first discovery, I sat in my car outside an upscale downtown hotel, watching Andrew and Jenna walk in together. Laughing, his hand resting on the small of her back. I took photos without thinking, filing them away in my growing dossier. That night, Andrew arrived home late, blaming an emergency surgery. I nodded, warmed his dinner, and listened to his vivid story about a child with a ruptured appendix. "You look exhausted," I said. studying the faint smear of lipstick at his collar, Jenna's color. "It was intense," he said, taking my hand across the table. "But I'm home now." The tenderness nearly shattered me. In that instant, I understood I was living with a stranger, someone who could meet my eyes while weaving a parallel life. The husband I'd trusted, the sister I'd loved, weren't the people I'd thought them to be. I withdrew my hand gently. "You should get some rest." As Andrew slept beside me that night, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them yet. I wouldn't grant them the spectacle of my tears or my fury. I would keep collecting proof, methodical and precise. And when I finally exposed them, it wouldn't be behind closed doors where they could control the story. It would be public, incontrovertible, and on my terms. For the next 2 months, I led a double life. By day, I was Vivian Hayes, devoted wife, caring sister, attending family events, keeping our home, performing the rituals of marriage with mechanical accuracy. By night, I became an investigator in my own life, meticulously tracing the web of deceit encircling me. The deeper I dug, the more intricate their scheme appeared. They'd even set up a shared digital calendar using coded entries to schedule their meetings. They had a joint credit card I'd never known existed, used solely for their rendezvous. There were even messages outlining future plans, vacations they wanted to take, the house they dreamed of buying, once they figured out the Vivian situation. After 3 months of quiet surveillance, I decided to test the waters with a carefully timed confrontation. I chose an evening when Andrew was tired after a long shift, his edges softened by a glass of wine. "I think we should talk about Jenna," I said casually as we sat on the porch swing. His body tensed. Barely, but enough for me to notice. "What about her?" "I've noticed you two seem close," Andrew laughed, the sound brittle around the edges. "She's your sister. Of course we're close." "No," I said evenly, holding his gaze. "I mean, really close. Is there something you want to tell me?" For a split second, I thought he might actually admit it. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe even guilt. Then his face hardened. "I don't know what you're suggesting, but I don't appreciate it," he said coldly. "Jenna is family. If you're feeling insecure, that's something you need to work through." The smoothness of it, the quick deflection, the subtle gaslighting, was almost artful. For a moment, it nearly made me question my own evidence. Almost. My next tactic was less subtle. I left browser tabs open to hotel confirmations, placed my carefully organized timeline where he might accidentally find it. Each time, Andrew either dismissed it, spun a convenient explanation, or ignored it entirely. Meanwhile, Jenna launched her own counterattack. She began calling more often, suggesting sister time with exaggerated enthusiasm. At gallery events, she introduced me to single men, smiling as she said, "You and Andrew both think you work too much. You should get out more, Viv." The cruelty of it, the sheer audacity of trying to set me up with someone while sleeping with my husband, was breathtaking. Then came the revelation that cut deeper than any other. My mother, blissfully unaware, mentioned over brunch that Jenna had been helping Andrew plan something special for our anniversary. "She's been so secretive about it," Mom said fondly, "but she told me they've been working on it for months." Our anniversary was still 4 months away. The realization that they were using it as a cover story, even involving my own mother in their elaborate lie, solidified something inside me. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a calculated manipulation, a campaign designed to rewrite the truth and control the narrative. I decided to end it on my terms. One evening, I deliberately left the proof of their affair, hotel receipts, screenshots of their messages, spread neatly across the kitchen counter where Andrew couldn't miss them. Then I waited in the living room, ready for the confrontation I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks. Hours later, he walked in, his expression grim. "We need to talk," he said, sitting opposite me. "Yes, we do," I replied. an odd sense of relief washing over me. Finally. "I found something disturbing," he said, placing a folder on the coffee table between us. I reached for it, expecting to see my own evidence staring back. Instead, I found printed emails between me and a colleague, David, from work. Innocent exchanges about a project, clumsily edited to look intimate, suggestive. "I know about David," Andrew said, his voice tight with rehearsed pain. "How long has this been going on?" For a second, the absurdity of it almost made me laugh. He had fabricated an affair, mine, to cover his own. "There's nothing going on with David," I said quietly. "Those are work emails, and you know it." "They seem pretty intimate to me," he countered, his tone perfectly calibrated to sound wounded, yet composed. "All those late nights at the office, it all makes sense now." The realization hit me like a cold wave. He wasn't deflecting. He was crafting his alibi, carefully constructing a story where my supposed unfaithfulness had pushed him straight into Jenna's arms. The precision of it all sent a chill through me. "I think we should take some time apart," he said, reaching for my hand with that perfectly rehearsed concern. "This isn't healthy for either of us." In that instant, I knew confrontation would be useless. Andrew and Jenna had invested too deeply in their version of the truth. They would deny, twist, and rewrite reality until their fiction became accepted fact. "Time apart might be good," I said calmly, watching relief wash over his face. He hadn't expected me to agree so easily. "I'm glad you understand," he replied, giving my hand a sympathetic squeeze. "This isn't about blame. Sometimes people just grow apart." His manufactured compassion was almost impressive. I wondered how many times he'd practiced this very conversation with Jenna, fine-tuning his expression in her bathroom mirror. "I'll stay with Jenna while we figure things out," he added casually. "She offered her guest room when I told her about everything." Of course she had. I nodded, playing my assigned role in their little production while quietly shifting to the next stage of my own plan. If Andrew mistook my compliance for surrender, he was gravely mistaken. The following week, as Andrew moved his things into Jenna's apartment, I took a personal day from work. While they assumed I was buried in spreadsheets, I was sitting in the office of Douglas Parker, a private investigator recommended by a colleague. He specialized in infidelity cases and had testified in countless divorce proceedings. "I'm not looking to hire you," I began, spreading my evidence across his desk. "I just need a professional opinion on what I have, and what else I might need." Douglas examined my neatly organized files, his eyebrows lifting in surprise. "Most clients come to me with suspicions," he said. "You've brought a complete case file." "It's what I do for a living," I replied. "Just not usually in my personal life." He confirmed what I already knew. My evidence was solid, but in isolation, still open to interpretation. He suggested strengthening my case with financial proof of deceit, witness statements, and, most importantly, evidence of intent. "Intent is everything," he explained. "If you can prove they conspired to deceive you, your position becomes significantly stronger." I left his office with renewed purpose and a checklist of next steps. Over the following month, I expanded my investigation beyond the affair itself. That's when I uncovered the real betrayals. Andrew had been siphoning money from our joint savings into a private account for nearly a year. Jenna had used my credit card, supposedly for emergencies, multiple times for her own expenses. But the worst discovery came from Andrew's cloud backups. His text messages were synced automatically, and what I found there shattered whatever restraint I had left. Threads of conversations between him and Jenna. Cruel, mocking, intimate. "She's so buried in her work she hasn't noticed a thing," Andrew had written. "We could probably have sex on the kitchen counter while she's typing in the next room," Jenna replied. "She'd probably thank us for making the decision for her. She never really knew how to be a proper wife anyway." Their casual cruelty burned through me. In that moment, something inside me shifted, irrevocably. The numbness that had once protected me began to melt away, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp anger. This wasn't simple betrayal. It was calculated psychological warfare, a coordinated effort to fracture my sense of reality while they maintained their facade of decency. That clarity brought purpose. Divorce was inevitable, but it would unfold on my terms, not theirs. I scheduled a consultation with Diana Wright, one of the most formidable divorce attorneys in Seattle. She examined my documentation with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen it all. "This is exceptional," she said finally. "Most clients come in with tears and accusations. You came with evidence, literal and metaphorical receipts." "What should I expect?" I asked. "With what you've gathered, you'll secure a favorable settlement. But remember, Washington's a no-fault state. The courts won't penalize them for the affair." "I'm not after legal punishment," I replied quietly. "I just want the truth acknowledged. I want their narrative dismantled." Diana studied me for a long moment before nodding. "The court of public opinion," she said, "can be far harsher than any judge. If that's what you want, consider carefully when, and how, you reveal what you know." Her words crystallized my plan. Andrew and Jenna had built a public story, a fragile fiction meant to protect their reputations. The only fitting response was truth, delivered publicly and precisely in a way they couldn't twist or control. As I left Diana's office, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Family dinner this Sunday, your father's birthday. Andrew and Jenna both confirmed. Please come. Don't make it awkward." The perfect stage had just presented itself. Every player, every audience member, all in one place, ready to witness their version of events. They had no idea I'd rewritten the script. For the next 3 days, I prepared with surgical precision. Each email I drafted was tailored for its recipient, containing only what they needed to see. For my father, documentation showing how Andrew had borrowed money from him while secretly funneling funds into his private account. For my mother, proof of how Jenna had used her as an unwitting alibi. For my aunts and cousins, a breakdown of the specific lies told to each of them. The final piece was a master email sent to myself, a comprehensive record of everything. The timeline, the evidence, the process. My guide for when the chaos inevitably erupted. Sunday morning arrived with strange calm. I woke before sunrise, composed and certain. I dressed in a simple blue dress, one Andrew used to call his favorite. I brushed my hair, applied soft makeup, and fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings. They'd always been her symbol of quiet strength, and today I needed that strength more than ever. As I reached for my keys, my phone chimed. A message from Jenna. "Just checking you're coming tonight. Dad would be heartbroken if you didn't. We're all family after all." The sheer audacity almost made me laugh. I took a steadying breath. In just a few hours, her carefully built illusion would crumble beneath the weight of undeniable truth. I arrived at my parents' house precisely, on time, balancing a homemade cake and a neatly wrapped gift for my father. The familiar sounds of home greeted me as I stepped inside. Laughter from the living room, the clatter of dishes, the steady hum of the television. And there they were, Andrew and Jenna, sitting side by side on the couch, perfectly staged. Their act of friendly innocence still intact, though they sat just a bit too close, testing the boundaries of their new, shameless narrative. "Vivian," my mother exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so glad you came," my mother said, her voice warm with relief. "This means so much to your father." I hugged her back, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume, wondering how she would see me later, after reading my email. Would she recognize the strength it had taken to survive months of quiet humiliation? Dinner unfolded with painful normalcy. We ate my mother's pot roast and spoke of harmless things. The weather, my cousin's new baby, my father's retirement plans. I smiled and nodded on cue, but inside, I was waiting, watching Andrew and Jenna trade subtle glances across the table. They thought they were minutes away from seizing control of the story. As dessert was served, Andrew cleared his throat and tapped his glass. The sound sliced through the chatter like a knife. I felt a strange déjà vu. It was the same gesture. He'd used at every milestone in our life together. Our engagement, his promotions, the purchase of our home. Only now, I saw those memories for what they truly were. Foundations laid over lies. But then, an unexpected hitch. My phone buzzed beneath the table, an alert from my email scheduler. Delivery failed. Server error. My pulse spiked. A quick glance confirmed the worst. None of the emails had gone out. My carefully timed revelation, the linchpin of my entire plan, was unraveling. While Andrew began his speech, his tone grave, his words rehearsed, I scrambled to resend them. The system's response mocked me. Temporary outage. Estimated recovery time unknown. A wave of panic hit. Without the emails, I would look exactly how they wanted me to. Shocked, broken, humiliated. Andrew's voice rose, steady and full of counterfeit sincerity. His hand slid into Jenna's, openly now. Around the table, my family's faces shifted. Confusion, pity, unease. Exactly the tableau he had orchestrated. I had seconds. 2 options: storm out in tears, or confront them empty-handed. Neither would do. Then it came to me. A third way, my laptop. I'd brought it as a backup. Under the table, I flipped it open, fingers steady despite the chaos in my chest. As Andrew delivered his final line, "Jenna and I have fallen in love," I pressed send. A single email, every attachment, every file, sent to everyone present. The silence that followed was electric. "Please," I said evenly, my voice cutting through the stillness. "Check your emails." The next moments unfolded like a perfectly timed performance. Around the table, phones chimed in staggered unison. Notifications lit up. Confused glances darted back and forth as one by one, they opened my message. "I've prepared some additional context for Andrew's announcement," I said calmly, watching his practiced smile start to fracture. "Just some documentation I thought everyone should have." My father was the first to react, his expression darkening as he scrolled. My cousin David muttered, "Holy shit," under his breath. My mother's hands trembled as she set her phone down, her eyes flicking between Jenna and me, horror dawning across her face. "What is this?" Andrew snapped, reaching for his own phone. "It's the truth," I said quietly. "Everything I've discovered over the past 6 months, organized for clarity. Hotel receipts, text messages, financial records, the complete history of your relationship with my sister." Jenna lunged for her phone, her face draining of color. "These are private conversations. You had no right. They're conversations about me," I interrupted coolly. "About how to deceive me. About how pathetic and oblivious I supposedly am. I especially liked the part where you debated whether to tell me before or after Christmas, and decided that ruining my holiday would be too cruel. Would you like me to continue rephrasing the next section in the same tone and precision?" Andrew was frantically scrolling through the evidence, his carefully rehearsed narrative of star-crossed lovers crumbling with every swipe. "This is an invasion of privacy," he stammered, face paling. "You can't just—" "Actually, I can," I interrupted coolly. "Washington is a one-party consent state for recordings. Our shared accounts were, well, shared. And most of this came from devices and logins you left open, often right here in our home." The room had gone completely still. Only the occasional gasp broke the silence as someone reached a particularly damning message or image. "You planned to announce this tonight," I continued, my voice level. "You choreographed it, every word, every expression, to control the narrative. The reluctant lovers, the brave decision, the clean break. You just didn't expect me to have a story of my own. My mother was the first to speak. "Jenna," she said, her voice trembling. "How could you do this to your sister?" It was happening. The shift I had been waiting for. The unraveling of their fiction. The truth rewriting the story they had built so carefully. Andrew tried to regain control, his physician's tone snapping back into place. "This is clearly Vivian's way of processing a difficult transition," he began, adopting a condescending calm. "She's created this elaborate—" "Stop talking, Andrew," my father cut in sharply, his voice cold and final. "My daughter doesn't fabricate evidence. It's her literal profession." Jenna, predictably, turned on the tears. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she sobbed. "It just happened. You can't control who you fall in love with." "According to your texts," my cousin David said dryly, holding up his phone, "you've been planning this for over 2 years. That's not just something that happens." A ripple of outrage spread through the room as more relatives scrolled through the emails. Aunt Patricia was comforting my mother, who stared at Jenna as if seeing her for the first time. Uncle James demanded explanations from Andrew about the financial discrepancies I had exposed. I stayed silent. After months of collecting, organizing, and analyzing, there was nothing left for me to add. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Clear, methodical, undeniable. When the chaos reached its peak, I stood and picked up my purse. "I should go," I said softly. "Dad, I'm sorry about your birthday dinner." My father rose immediately. "I'll walk you out." Outside, the night air was cool and grounding. He pulled me into a fierce hug. "I had no idea what you were going through," he said, voice thick. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "I needed to understand it first," I replied. "And I needed everyone else to understand it too, not just believe me." As I drove away, my phone lit up with messages: support, disbelief, anger. But I turned it off, embracing the quiet. The next morning, I filed for divorce. Andrew and Jenna's narrative had collapsed completely, not through screaming or spectacle, but through something far more powerful: the simple, undeniable force of truth. 3 months later, as I signed the final papers, Diana, my attorney, asked if I felt satisfied. "I don't feel satisfaction," I said honestly. "Just clarity." I had spent my career uncovering digital evidence of human behavior. I never imagined my most complex case would be my own marriage. But professionals use the tools they have, and in the end, methodical truth accomplished what emotional confrontation never could. It stripped away the lies and left only reality. That evening, I packed the last of my belongings and moved into my new apartment overlooking Puget Sound. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, I deleted the investigation files from my computer, the final act of closure on a year-long ordeal. Tomorrow, I thought, watching the reflection of the city lights dance across the water, would be the first page of a new story, one written entirely in my own hand.